Greetings and welcome to the Wild Swans at Coole. Today's video is based on T.S. Eliot's famous essay The Metaphysical Poets, and in this video we are going to discuss about what are the features of metaphysical poetry according to T.S. Eliot within 500 words. So these metaphysical poets, you know that they are very different than the other English poets. How they are different? Because of their writing style, because of their thought process which differ, which makes them unique from the main current of English poets. So in this way they have differed from the main current of English poetry. And Eliot himself has done some research, and he himself has pointed out some of the features of metaphysical poetry. So let's begin. Eliot's essay on the English metaphysical poets was originally published in the Times Literary Supplement as a review. So this essay was not Eliot's conscious choice of writing, but it was just a review of which book? It was a review of a book by Herbert J.C. Grierson titled Metaphysical Lyrics and Poems of the 17th Century done to Butler. So this essay is the review of the book Metaphysical Lyrics and Poems of the 17th Century done to Butler, which was published in the Times Literary Supplement. Eliot comments Grierson's efforts but devotes. So Eliot commented or praises that how Grierson has done so much to collect all the metaphysical lyrics and poems of the 17th century in one particular anthology. But he also devotes his review that the majority of his commentary expresses the views on the unique contribution of metaphysical poetry and poets which makes to English poetry writing in general and on its continuing value as a literary movement or school. So though Eliot has praised Grierson's efforts of making a separate book, but his review also focuses on the metaphysical poets' contribution on English poetry, which is metaphorically as if a literary movement. These poets include John Donne, George Herbert, Henry Vaughan, Abraham Henry Coole, Richard Crusoe and Bishop King. So these are the poets he has mentioned in his essay The Metaphysical Poets. Now what are the features? There are 5 features that I have pointed out in this video. So let's begin with the number 1. As to their most characteristic stylistic trait, one that makes them all worthy of is the title metaphysical. So the number 1 characteristics is the title itself, metaphysical. The term metaphysical is given by Samuel Johnson. Eliot singles out the term metaphysical concept or concept as we quote from his essay, the elaboration of a figure of speech to the furthest stage to which ingenuity can carry it. So the term metaphysical is given by Samuel Johnson, and Eliot has coined out the term's definition as the elaboration of a figure of speech. So according to Eliot, metaphysical is a elaboration of a figure of speech to the furthest stage, to a very far limit, to a very extent in which ingenuity can carry it. So that ingenuity can carry it. Number 2. Another characteristic that isolates these poets from the main current of English literature is their precise use or not using of metaphor, simile or other concepts like all the poets. So the thing that differs this metaphysical poetry or metaphysical poets from the main current of English literature is that not that they very precisely used metaphor, or some if they even not using metaphor, simile or other concept, they uses metaphysical metaphor, simile concept. Metaphysical poets uses metaphor, simile concept, but not like other poets. How they use? They compare things by using metaphysics. So they use metaphor, simile, which is for the case of metaphysical, which is not metaphor or simile but conceit. So they have uses, but they have used it with the mix of metaphysics. According to Eliot, which is the elaboration of a figure of speech contrasted with the condensation, so which connects to the first characteristic that so they compare things by using metaphysics, which is the elaboration of a figure of speech. So what is metaphysics? Metaphysics is a elaboration of figure of speech contrasted with the condensation. For example, in Two Destiny, Henry Cowley compares the world with a chessboard. You will think that how a world can be a chessboard, but if you read the poem, you will understand that how Eliot has used his logic, feelings, and thoughts to compare the world with a chessboard. Like if you have read the book Alice in Wonderland, you will also realize that there is a section uh, where Alice plays chess, and if we interpret that chapter, it will realize that the chessboard is our own world. So similarly, Cowley compares the world to a chessboard, and in a valediction, Donne compares two lovers with a pair of compasses. In the poem Valediction, John Donne has compared the lover, him and his beloved, as if they are like a pair of compasses. They are stuck even if how far they go. So if you see that a compass has two um, has two stick or two line, and they are connect with one point, so how much the gap between the two stick but goes, but they are still connected to one. So the Dan is saying that how much I and my beloved goes far away, but we are still connected, so no one can differ us. So let's summarize that. Number one, the term metaphysical itself make them different, and number two, their use of concept, metaphors or simile, how they use, they just not like metaphors and simile, they compare things through metaphysics. Number three, the sources of the metaphysical poets is vitality of language, is their use of telescoping of images and multiplied associations secured by brief words and sudden contrast, means their ability of comparing two objects that don't have any relation with one another. Just like we say that, if we think that how can a lover and beloved can be compared to a compass, a pair of compass, but how they make the connection? They make the connection through the use of telescoping of images and multiplied associations secured by brief words and sudden contrast, and which is being criticized by Johnson. He remarks in Metaphysical Poetry that the most heterogeneous ideas and the most different ideas are yoked by violence together. The word yoked means forcefully. So Johnson is criticizing that metaphysical poets forcefully connects two ideas. But this Eliot defends by saying there's a degree of heterogeneity of material compelled into unity, and they are not yoked, or they are not forcefully connected. Number one, we can say that it is metaphysical. The term metaphysical itself makes them different. Number two, that they differ from the main current of English literature. How? Because of their use of concept through the elaboration of a figure of speech, and which is metaphysics. And number three is their vitality of language, or the use of telescoping of images and multiplied associations secured by brief words and sudden contrast, means their ability of comparing two objects that don't have any relation with one another. So which is being criticized by Johnson, but Eliot defends it. Number four, the language of these poets are pure and simple. So if you read John Donne's canonization or the poem valediction, there is not like very very rhetorical language, uh, but the structure of the sentences are not simple. They are because they are of fidelity to thought and feeling. So their language are very pure and simple, but structure of sentence are not simple, because to prove their logic, right, they are very logical poets. So to prove that how he and his lover is connecting, is similar to a pair of compass, he has to uh, use his sentence in such a way that in a result becomes very complex, and it is because of their fidelity to thought and feeling, because they constantly uses thought and feeling simultaneously side by side. So number one, they are comparing that I and lover are in love, but we can never detach, but also he in the same time he has to prove that how and why they cannot differ. So there is the fidelity of thought and feeling. Their language are far less artificial than romantic. So in a way their language are not artificial like romantic. So romantics will if you read the other romantics poetry, you will realize that they have used very rhetoric language, to make their poetry, to sound their poetry beautiful. For example, if you read John Keats, you will realize that how he has compared that the bird nightingale is always be there. So similarly, that is how Keats and Donne differs. So it is because of these poets want to be honest. So another quality is these poets are honest with themselves, and as it has variety to thought and feeling, so it has of music. So there is also a musical quality in them, and reader can interpret in many ways, but to understand their rapid association of thought, the readers also have to be agile, a development by rapid association of thought which requires considerable agility on the part of the reader. So Eliot is saying that to understand these poets association of thoughts, the readers also have to be agile, because the readers also have to be uh, very not conservative but very open minded, so that they will understand the poet's intention. Because if the reader from the first hand start to criticize metaphysical poets, then they will never understand uh, the juice of their poetry, or what is the fun of their poetry. Just like Johnson has criticized it, that heterogeneous ideas are yoked by violence together. So similarly the readers will feel, but if you have to feel the uniqueness of these poets, you have to be agile, according to Eliot. Number 5, what makes these metaphysical poets different from others is their unification of sensibility. So they unified sensibility. They do not dissociate their thought and feeling, just like the other poets of 17th century. So they associate their thoughts and feelings. They unified the sensibility. They do not differ. They do not think that thoughts and feelings are different. They connect it. They, though thoughts and feelings are different, it is another point, but they connect it. So it is their intellectual quality. So another thing, that they are intellectual poets. It is their intellectual quality to amalgamate disparate experiences, so they can connect two different experiences through metaphysics. It is their intellectual quality. They can connect the experience of falling in love or reading a book, Spinoza, or with the noise of reading book with the noise of typewriter or the smell of cooking. So as if, for example, they connect that I and my beloved is like a pair of compass. So similarly they can connect falling in love with smell of cooking. This is Eliot saying, because of their intellectual quality. Thus Eliot says that this is the difference between intellectual poets and reflective poets like Tennyson and Browning. A thought to done, Eliot's quote, a thought to done was an experience, it modified his sensibility. But as for other poets, they can only think or only feel, or their thinking overpower, overpowers their feeling. So for Tennyson and Browning, their thoughts overpowered their feelings or their feelings overpowered their self. For Tennyson and Browning, if you read My Last Duchess, you will realize that uh, they are only feeling or they are only thinking. But for intellectual poets like metaphysical poets, they are feeling and thinking simultaneously. Or even if they are feeling and thinking simultaneously, they are also writing with feeling and thinking. So whereas Dryden and Milton, each of these men performed certain poetic functions so magnificently well that the magnitude of the effect concealed the absence of others. So in conclusion, we can say that Eliot argues that metaphysical poets are by far more knowledgeable, more curious, more philosophical than other poets. Number one, so according to Eliot, metaphysical poets are knowledgeable, more curious, and more philosophical than other poets. And their uniqueness forced them to differ from the main kind of English poetry. So they do not have any intention to be differ, but their uniqueness makes them differ from the main kind of English poetry. So if you think like that they are very separate from the English poetry, no, main kind of, no, but the way they write, the way they think, the way they feel simultaneously, it makes them differ. But Eliot proves that they belong from the main current as from their unification dissociation takes place, but they also belong from the main current, right? If you say, but though their writing style is very different, but they are still from the main current, because how much we read them, they are very famous, so they are becoming, the classic. Their poetry are becoming very classic. So in this way, they are belonging from the main current also. So they are different from the main current, but also belonging because of their unification. Because of their unification, their dissociation takes place. So their unification of sensibility of thought and feelings makes them dissociate. So also modern poets like Eliot, so Eliot himself have practiced unification of sensibility, but we do not know whether his effort is acceptable or not. But one has to say that by far metaphysical poets are the most relatable poets, or they feel the both. So they feel the both. So that is it for today's video, guys. I have given the essay in the description, the link of the essay in the description. You can download it from there, and please share with your friends, and like and subscribe. And if you have any difficulty in understanding, please read it 2 or 3 times, and also the essay, and you will realize that this, if you read it, do a close reading, I will say, because this is not so very difficult if you understand in a very simple term, though. But for writing a note, you sometimes have to quote, right? So this quotation may be some different, because this is Eliot's language, but you can change it in your simple language. But for the quotation, you have to practice a little bit.